So, good morning again. Today, we're going to talk about the new changes to the forms that just came out in July. As a reminder for these, technically, you've got 90 days before you kind of have to put them in place. All the new documents, as we've talked about, are already in dot loop. They should be auto-populating in your loops and everything. If you're seeing old documents, please let me know, but they've already been added. The ones that I have to add manually because there's information in there, like the disclosure, the professional services disclosure with our vendor and everything, that should already be in there. So if you see any of those and have any questions about those, please let me know. But before we get into the forms, I just wanted to do kind of like a quick recap for those of you who were able to log into the meeting yesterday and just see if you had any additional thoughts or questions about any of that discussion. I think it was really good and helpful, and I hope it was helpful for those of you who could get in there just to talk about some stuff. Also, some of it was a little confusing, so I just wanted to make sure that we were kind of all on the same page. One thing that I was confused about was, initially they said you need to, or at least my understanding was, and we kind of parsed through it in the group a little bit, was you need to have the compensation agreement filled out before you submit an offer. But then as the guy kept talking, it was like, actually, you don't. You can send it along with the offer. You just don't reference it at all on the actual offer document. So it's not listed like any of the other additional addenda that you normally would check, like a buyer possession or seller possession or whatever. So I wanted to make sure we were all clear about that.
And he did make sure to say, make sure there's no connection between the two, that it's not dependent on the compensation and or vice versa. If you do send it together, to make that distinction that one doesn't depend on the other, and then it's all good.
Yes. I had a different takeaway, that you can put in that the offer is contingent on the commission.
No, Ellen, I'm sorry. Mark, maybe I didn't hear you correctly. You can put that in the email as part of the terms of the offer. You absolutely can. It just can't be in the actual offer itself.
Right.
Huh. So you can make it contingent?
Yeah. Yeah, you can say the buyer, these are the buyer's terms. So if you're not doing this, then the buyer, this is not their offer, right? It's really no different. It's just there's no place for it in the actual offer document. It has to be. So some of you probably don't remember this, but maybe some of you do. Years ago, the offer to purchase actually had a contingency box in it, like contingent to sell. Now you have to tell them if you're selling, but that contingency stuff is gone, right? So this is kind of along that same line of thought. It is contingent, but it's not stated in the offer that it's contingent. So you're basically letting them know, hey, this is our folks' terms. One thing that he suggested, and it's something that, I want to talk about and maybe start to get some stuff on paper, is just coming up, and we've talked about this before, and we actually have one, if you remember from the training, but refining it a little bit, like having a standard language to attach and to put in the body of an email when you send an offer over to someone. And maybe it's just we include the line about compensation in there. Thoughts on that, anybody? Ellen also sent me a really cool thing that she found, which is similar to some language that we have already in the guides about regarding commission and how it changed. And it's also similar to the documents that we have that is actually the commission disclosure, and it says very clearly what our commission is and that it's negotiable and all of that stuff. So I would, at least until I update anything, I would recommend you continue to use that with your clients. It's there for a reason, to make sure that it's, full transparency, that things are negotiable.
So I just want to be, I guess, clear that on each transaction, we are at the mercy of each seller and list agent, outside of having the buyer signed compensation agreement that they'll cover the difference. So if they're offering X, that's negotiable on the seller side. And unless we have that buyer agency agreement signed for just say 2.4, then each time we go into a transaction, it's just a crapshoot that what we get paid.
Yes. So you want to make sure that you're doing what we've been talking about the last several months, is making that very clear to your folks when you do your buyer consult and go through the strategy guide, and set it clear expectations about the commission and why. And, you know, also remind them everything is negotiable. And of course, we want to negotiate in a way that you don't have to come out of pocket to pay me directly, you know,
Sure.
but understand it's not as transparent as it used to be.
I got a question about that. So I have a client yesterday that wants to see a property. And I told them, I was like, hey, they're only offering 2%. Our buyer agency agreement says this. This is what the difference would be if, you know, you purchase this house. They said, yeah, that's fine. It's only like a delta of like, I don't know, $650 or something. But is there paperwork? Like, how do we make sure, is that covered per the BAA for the firm, or is that extra paperwork they have to do with the firm for the attorney for commission? Like, how does that work in the event that they go under contract with that and the delta that the buyer is responsible
That's a
for?
good
Is that just something
question.
that they do? Is that just something that they do outside of closing afterwards that they pay us directly? How does that work, Doug, if the event that the buyer does come to pay the firm the delta?
No, you want it all done within the attorney's office as far as the money. So they shouldn't be paying you directly. It would go as a line item on their CD. It should, as like a closing cost, unless anyone has been told differently. Please let me know. The agency agreement already states that they're making up the difference. What you do is these wonderful little buyer and seller forms that we have to get filled out for the attorney transaction, which are probably my least favorite part of any transaction, is having to deal with those things, states what the commission is. So you just need to make sure that you let the attorney know, you know, the seller side, if you're working with a buyer, the seller side is paying X, the client is making up the delta.
I have another question. How do we handle buyers that once we explain that, they are like, oh, well, yeah, no, I don't want to see homes that I have to pay any additional funds for?
Correct. Then you
Then call the agent, you go to the house and say, are you protecting a buyer agent? And if you say no, say, okay, thank you. My client doesn't want to see property.
Okay. And that's legal, because that is like what I feel like this whole change was supposed to be protecting.
The change
April.
wasn't. The change really, in my opinion, isn't about protecting anybody. It's just about being transparent.
Yeah. My people specifically said if a seller is not offering us commission, they don't want to see the house. They said that's not fair. I said, okay, well then we'll just have, starting August 1st, I'm going to have to make phone calls for whatever properties you're interested in to see if they're offering a commission. And she said, well, if they're not even offering it, I don't want to see it. So that's exactly to your point. As sellers, it's in their best interest to do it, because it's going to decrease the pool of buyers if they don't, in my opinion. So,
right.
Of course. I mean,
we can't choose. We can't choose not to show a home because they're not offering commission. But if we tell our clients that they're not offering commission and they choose not to see it because of that reason, then that's fine. Does that distinction?
Do we need to get something in writing for that? Like, that's my concern. Is like,
April, it'd be the same thing like if your client said, I don't want to see a house that's on a busy road. If I don't want to be backed up to a highway, it's the same thing. You know, it'd be like, or a better example would be, I don't want to see houses that are 2 stories.
You're not steering, April, if that's what you're worried about. You're not steering.
That's what I'm worried about.
No.
I'm
They're telling you what they want.
Somebody coming back and saying, yeah, I hear that, but I also am fearful of getting the commission on me because I didn't show XYZ home when a buyer finds out that there was one next door that was priced less, but wasn't doing. I just want a CYA.
So 2 things. You can certainly do that. There doesn't have to be an official form for that.
Okay.
just leave the text or send them an email and ask them to reply and confirm that's their wish, and put it in a loop. The other thing is remind them, hey, they say they're not offering one, but we can still all ask for, closing costs to offset
Okay.
what you need to bring to closing to do that. So there are ways around it. I would say, I don't want you to miss out on your dream house because of that. We can always negotiate, right?
Yeah.
But, that's our job is, to remind them not to be so black or white about things and that everything is up for negotiation.
And I don't mean to be a Debbie Downer. I apologize. That is not my intent. I just want to have all of my tools in my toolbox for when these situations come up. And obviously, I am new at negotiating these types of things. So I just want to have, as many answers as I'm sure everybody does. So sorry.
100%. No, don't apologize. That's the whole purpose of this conversation is to talk about stuff like this. And so we all get better with our language.
I think this might answer Janine's question.
I think that's important. That's why I like to.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Brandon, I can hear you.
Okay. I have a deal with Open Door right now. They're paying 1.4%.
Yep.
I told my buyer I would not do that. And so we came to an agreement on the buyer agency agreement. And so I sent the buyer agency agreement to the attorney to make sure that they were aware that Open Door is paying 1.4%. The buyer is paying me this percent. Please make sure this is on the CD and that we get one check at closing. I didn't get any pushback from doing that. I think that's the right way. This is the first time I've done something like this. Doug, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that or not, but I think that's the way to do it.
Did you edit the buyer agency after you negotiated it? Because don't you have the original one and then you go back and amend it? Or
Yeah, I mean,
Well,
I
if they're
think
making up, they have to amend it.
I think you can.
Yeah.
I think you can amend it if it's necessary. Yeah.
okay.
That's
easy enough.
For that property, you mean, Brandon, right?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
But again, if they're making up the difference, you don't have to amend it.
Right. But if you write the agreement that, up to 2.5 or what language we're using right now, and they happen to fall in love with a 3%, we have to go back and change our agency agreement to 3%.
Either that or that amendment document or the you have to make sure that, because then it's technically a bonus because it's more. I would suggest that you do the strike through, put the rate for the house that you go under contract on, and have them initial it on the agency.
Okay, so I have a couple of questions follow up on that. How are bonuses handled then? Or is that just completely out of all this? Doesn't matter?
Well, you still have
the way
to let
that I
people know.
understand.
You've always had to do that.
Say what you said again, Doug.
It's always been required that you let a client know if you're getting more than what's advertised in MLS. If there's
Okay, so now nothing is advertised in MLS. So here's the scenario. I go and we show
So a bonus would be
construction.
considered anything above the percentage you have listed in your agency agreement.
Okay, so how
But then how are we paid out on that?
well, wait, hold on, wait. Like on the cooperating compensation agreement, okay, it says, check only one seller or listing firm, and then the other things on there. So if it's like 2.4% plus like a $5,000 bonus on the form, is that where you're filling that out? Or do you do this separately? Like on the form, like walk it through, it would be 2.4% of the gross price or other, because it says or, not and. So I don't understand where we put that bonus on the form.
Charles, the way that I've done it in the past is like, for instance, if there was like an agent bonus or a builder bonus, you have your regular commission, and then there's an actual form that you have to have your buyer sign stating that they're aware that you're receiving a bonus, and then you write the amount, where it's coming from and where it's going. And that can be a dollar amount or a percentage or whatever. And then that goes to the attorney. So the attorney knows to pay that extra. That's outside of commission.
Okay, but I'm talking about the form to the
20.
seller. Yeah, the form 220. How do you put that on?
So I just received my first one on my listing because this agent's BIC is making them get into the process of starting to use it now. So obviously she already knew what the commission was. So she just wrote 2.5 on there and sent it over. But I don't know, because that's what our commission was. So are you asking if the commission is more than 2.5?
Okay, so here's the scenario. Houses for sale. 2.5%. What it doesn't 2.5%. And if you get it under contract for me within the next 30 days, I'm gonna pay a $5,000 bonus. How do I put that on the form 220? When I send the offer, how do I put that? How do I put that $5,000 bonus?
Well, you could just
I
do the
think that
math
you
and put the
still
total.
use the bonus paperwork. That would
Yeah.
be my thing. Doug, is that not right?
Did you hear what I said?
No.
I would say that you can just put the dollar amount and do the math.
So just okay, so just do it that way, put a flat fee.
I would. Because you know what the amount's going to be.
Right. So but is that what we
Because you know
should
what
do?
the
I
amount
mean, it's
I would in an instance like that when it's not just a percentage.
okay.
Or do the other line and say, and actually just type it out, 2.4% plus $5,000 bonus.
Okay.
So I would do one of those because you only check one line. So you can't do like the percentage and then other for the bonus. So just do other and put the whole calculation right there or whatever. That's what I would do.
So
Here,
then
let me
on
check the screen. I doubt everybody has it in front of them right now. So give me just a second.
yeah, and then when you do that on paragraph 3, I know we had talked about it to write in day of closing. Is that after going through that NAR thing, or is that still what you would suggest?
Well, I mean, the guy suggested putting like a date after closing, just in the. I think you can do either one. You just want to make sure it's dated on what your closing date on your contract is going to be. That's what I would suggest.
So
But I
don't
mean,
write
you
day
could
of
do
closing.
like 6 months out.
Okay.
I think you could do either one. You might get
Charles, the one
pushback
I got, she dated for
months out.
October.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
I think it's going to depend on how the listing agent is going to react to some of this stuff while people are figuring them out. That's why I said date of closing, because that makes it just germane to this particular offer and not like a future offer or something like that. But, I think either one are acceptable.
I would put like a month afterward in case you get delayed for some reason. I wouldn't want to have to deal with someone being a stickler and saying, well, your buyer delayed us by 4 days. And technically this commission agreement says this expires on the day of closing, but we closed late.
Well, the
Yeah.
day of closing means the day it closed, not the day on the contract, in my opinion.
To me, it's not worth having the argument.
Yeah.
So Doug, just to clarify, we marked the listing agent one, right? Or the listing firm box, correct?
What are you talking about?
The first line, the first box.
Page 1.
Well, I guess it depends. Yeah.
Oh, so if
Yeah,
it's like a FISBO, if it's a FISBO, you would select seller.
Seller, yeah.
Or if the listing firm is telling you that they're paying 0% and you want to make it part of the offer, you would do seller. Does that
All right,
make sense?
say that one more time. You broke up on my end.
So if the listing firm tells you they're paying 0% and you want to make an offer anyways, then you would check seller.
Kind of
So
confusing to
question,
me.
Got it?
let's say the
So
scenario
if the
is,
listing firm tells you up front, hold on, Charles. Janine, if the listing firm tells you up front they're offering 0%, then you wouldn't check the listing firm box. If you want to send this over as part of an offer, you would check the seller box, or in a FSBO situation like Charles mentioned. Does that make sense?
Got it. Got it.
Okay. Go ahead,
so
Charles.
if they're doing the same thing there, couldn't you fill this out, right, and put 0, and then just on the OTP for the closing costs, put in whatever dollar amount?
Assume that you could. If you're putting 0%, you don't need to use the document, in my opinion.
Yeah, so if the listing firm says we're not paying it, they're not paying anything, couldn't you just use on the OTP? It's like towards the end there. I'm gonna find it.
I
Yeah, the
don't think
seller
you
pay
can do
closing.
that because you
Yeah.
can create a problem with the buyer's loan.
So
the buyer
okay, so it would make a
maximum
problem with the
closing cost
buyer's loan.
is 6%. So that shouldn't be an issue, should it?
Well, if they're getting actual closing costs from the seller on top of it, in addition to the commission, and you're asking for 2.4%, and they're getting the equivalent of,
Well, sure. You definitely need to make sure the math works.
Right.
Definitely. That's right. You do need to be aware
But from
of
a
that.
simplicity standpoint, would that also be an option? Basically, you just go in and say, whatever, it's $15,000 for closing costs, whatever number it comes out to be.
I think so. Yeah. If they're explicitly not paying a commission and you negotiate and the buyer agrees to use seller paid closing costs for that reason, then yeah, I think that's the way to do it. Because in that instance, there's no direct commission being paid from the list side or the seller. So this form is necessary.
The whole form is cooperating. So it means you can only cooperate with the firm. Isn't that right? You couldn't necessarily have that seller cooperate. So it means firm to firm.
Well, no, it says seller on there, so you can
Mark, you can
cooperate
still
with the
use
seller
this for a
too,
for
but
sale by
it
owner.
means the other side.
Okay.
Right. But it means you're cooperating with the other side, not your side that you're representing. You don't need, that's what the agency agreement is for. Make sense? Cool. All right. Anybody else want to talk about the 220 anymore? Are we good with that? Super. All right. Really quickly, I want to go through these 2 videos that the guy talked about with the agency agreement, because I think 15 minutes. And then we'll talk about the other forms. So can everybody see my screen okay?
Yes.
I'll make it a little bit bigger. All right. 2 videos, about 15 minutes. If you have a question or want to discuss, raise your hand or something and I'll pause it.
All right. Moving on to Form 201, the exclusive buyer agency agreement. As part of the antitrust settlement, there's a lot of changes in the settlement that were mandated to be in buyer agency agreements going forward. Some jurisdictions are going to have a real argument with that because they don't have buyer agency at all, which we do here. Substantial compliance with the settlement, even as it was. The work had to do on the settlement.
The video is pretty jumpy. It'll be slow and it'll be fast and also pauses.
That contract, something that
Okay, unfortunately, I can't do anything about the internet, so this is what I'll do. Here are the links. Check the chat. That's the first link. That's the second link. I'd copy those and put them in my browser so you can reference them and take a look at them after the meeting.
Thank you.
What is What is that
Gotcha.
referencing again?
It's the attorney explaining the buyer agency agreement changes.
And that's
Okay.
from the meeting yesterday?
No, but it's the same guy from yesterday.
Yeah, I noticed the lawyer.
I put this in the meeting link, but just as another reference, here's the link to this page I'm getting ready to share. This is the link to the page that goes through all of the summary of the forms for residential, okay? There's a handful. So I'm gonna go through this really quickly. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
There's nothing. Okay, now it's on. Okay, it's up now.
So when you open the link that I just sent with this, and again, I encourage you to do this on your own as you go through this. You can click on the form right here to open it in a separate tab, and can just go through and the changes right here. You see what I'm referencing? It highlights the changes on the actual document. Okay. So they took out some superfluous language here, right there. You want to make sure that you see that you're using revised forms, right? Now they should all be in our dot loop, but just as a
July
point of
24th.
reference. You know, if you go in there and you see an old one, you know, also be on the lookout for the disclosures too. A lot of people are using the new disclosures now. They're in our dot loop when you're working with sellers, but in some cases, some buyers, or when you're representing some buyers, you might still see the old disclosures in MLS for a while. Again, you've got like 90 days to switch over. Actually, if a listing's on the market a while, you know, nobody is probably going back and updating disclosure and having their sellers do it again. We need to. The listing agreement was already signed. So, but you can see the differences here. There's an extension period for the DD. Checkboxes added to create more certainty around the DD period. Either pick a date or choose a certain number of days, which we have been doing. At least I have always, or for a long time now. You know, I will say, don't pick 14 days or 21 days from the day you're, because sometimes in due diligence. So now instead of just putting the date, they've got the box to put a certain number of days there for due diligence. Make sense?
I think that's smart.
Cool. Yeah, definitely. I think I would not pick a certain date. I like the days. So hopefully this makes sense here. Any questions about these first on the offer to purchase? A lot of it is just language difference, so not a whole lot of difference in the actual fields you're filling out. And then of course with the changes on the guidelines that reflect the actual document, right? This is some changes to the buyer possession, which I know is probably not used a lot, but make sure that you're aware of that. In the event that you do it, man, I haven't used one of these in a long time. It seems like people are just completely against this more now than they have been lately, or maybe it's just people don't have to negotiate as much. But just make sure that you know you're understanding what's in there. Additional provisions, language stricken to make clear that agents use this form with the vacant land offer to purchase in order to indicate the seller must complete clearing the properties for septic tests. So, you know, that's as a reminder, if you're making an offer on vacant land, that's part of the additional provisions. If you're like asking the seller to get a septic test or something like that, you're doing that with the offer. That's not like a due diligence ask, or shouldn't be. You're doing it, you're making it a term of the offer. And this just making it clear that they have to actually clear the space to do it. You guys ever use the 10T?
No.
What's that for?
Want to take a look at it?
Flow chart. State properties.
So this is just kind of a handy guideline that you can provide to your buyers to give them an idea of what the process could look like. Good to know, helpful for folks. So just more another area in your quiver to help take care of your folks. That's about the vacant land again, exclusive right to sell listing agreement. So there's information about the lawsuit, right? Language added to make clear the broker compensation is fully negotiable. Just like we've been talking about, making sure it's clear it's negotiable, right? And being very transparent about that. Not set by law, determined by each broker and firm individually. Language further added to require the client's consent if compensation is offered that is more than agreed to by the client in the agency contract. All these edits are required by the settlement. Should be noted that the answer no can be part of any negotiation. Any agent or firm is permitted to determine the value of their services, so long as that value is not set, determined, coordinated, or in any way unlawfully affected by what a competitor might charge or is charged. Firms are strongly encouraged to discuss their compensation policies with their own lawyer. Okay. Another edit. Initial lines added for the seller or firm to understand that compensation is not required. They do not refuse to work. But the better language is, no, I'm not going to work with you. The language is, this is why it makes sense to do that, which is language that is included, in our seller guide and things like that to help explain the benefit and also potential scenarios if you're not doing that, what possibly happens. Does that make sense? Yes, no questions? Okay.
Yes.
You're freezing up.
You are freezing up a lot, Doug.
Sorry. Hopefully that makes sense. What I said or what it's alluding to, or the language here for everyone just saying, hey, you have to make clear. We can not work with people because we don't. That's our firm policy, but the better
Guess we lost Doug.
Looks like it.
Was he completely frozen for y'all?
I
Yeah.
hear nothing and see nothing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm glad it's not just me. I thought it was because I was driving.
guys
Well, at
there.
least we now. Yeah. Hey,
You guys
Doug,
hear me?
we lost you for a bit.
Some of you are maybe some aren't.
And again, maybe.
Sorry, some of you are.
Sorry, Doug.
I think his connection just dropped off because it said I'm the host.
Oh,
I think he's back in now.
You guys hear me now?
yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm really sorry about that. I don't know why the internet is being so bad today. I apologize. Of course, we do this once a week, and today it's terrible. So, hopefully you all gathered somewhat what I was saying. It's a good idea, and what they might get as part of an offer if they don't offer it up front. That's all part of the seller strategy session. That language is in there. So make sure when you're working with sellers that you're explaining that to them. right? Any questions?
Yeah,
guys
we're
there?
here.
Everyone's muted, so I can't hear. Okay. Any other questions about the seller docs? So just going forward, the same language or slower language is going to be in the buyer agency agreement, right? Being very transparent about the NAR settlement, right? Helping them understand about how we are paid. That it's a negotiation, that there are no set fees, that every firm can do it different, and that we're expecting a certain amount, which is in the agency agreement, and that it's incumbent upon them to make up any difference, whether 0.1 or 2.4, if it's not being offered by the seller side, because we don't work for free, just like they probably don't. So, to the points that we discussed earlier, making sure that you're able to figure that out before you show them a house, right? So they're well aware. Okay.
Doug,
And
we lost you for several minutes during the listing agent stuff. Did you say that that our firm policy is we will not work with a seller that does not offer compensation?
No, I said a firm policy can be that. I don't think that we should unequivocally tell a seller that we're not going to work with them because they're not offering anything. I think that we need to make sure that we do a really good job of explaining how the market response might be to that and how they might be offered or asked for that amount in another way. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, the way that I handled it with my list agreement or my list appointment on Monday was obviously and honestly, those sellers already were kind of up to speed with the whole situation, which made it a lot easier for me. But I told them, I was like, obviously this is negotiable. Our firm provides the buy side X amount. Obviously the total commission is negotiable. So, I always want to let them know that our firm policy when we represent buyers is X, so that they can, it gives an example for the other side. And so, when we negotiate commission, take it off the list side.
Yeah, and that's our job, right? To explain it and make sure that they're aware of why this happened and how we anticipate people reacting to it. And also, it's a really good reason to highlight that, hey, I also work with buyers. It's like other things that I'll tell sellers is, hey, I'm also out showing homes. I don't just represent sellers. And this is what buyers are telling me they're looking for. So I think it might be a good job for you to do X, Y, Z in getting your house ready to market. Makes sense? Just kind of sharing that other perspective to help them see the shoe on the other foot. But that's perfect, Janine. That's exactly how you do it. No, our firm policy is not that we won't take a listing for a seller that won't pay any commission, but it is our job to help them understand how market might react to it, and it might be a good idea for them to do that to get their house sold, right? I think that
Yes.
I think that public conception is going to be that it's not going to make a huge difference in what the vast majority of sellers are doing when listing their property. There have always been people that have offered less or nothing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's why it's our job to educate our clients on what to expect and what the different scenarios could be.
And quite frankly, but
that's always been our job.
The last 3 sellers that I've worked with, when I've explained it, they're like, well, that's really annoying on y'all's end. Of course, we're going to offer a buyer agent, of course we're going to pay them, they want to sell their house. They understand it. So the overarching response from the sellers that I've talked to is, well, yeah, of course we would offer a buyer agent commission. So I think that as long as you are out there explaining it, you're not going to get a lot of pushback in my opinion. You know, I don't think we're going to get a ton of pushback from sellers wanting to compensate buyers when you explain it like, okay, well, this is how it could affect the sale of your property if you don't, situation like Doug was saying.
Right. And I think, you know, that's already been happening. And the same people who were doing it now were already doing it before. You know, so good point, Janine. Thank you for sharing that and your experience with everybody.
Sure.
Form 220 we just talked about at length. Does anybody have any additional questions about Form 220?
Oh.
Just note that it says right here, there will not be one right way to document cooperating compensation. This form is just one tool to be used. Consult with clients, lawyers, you know, everything to make sure that everything is documented completely. Any questions about that? We feel like we covered it pretty well. Look, if you're filling one of these out over the next month while you're figuring it out, let me know and I'll take a look at it before you send it to anybody. And we can discuss, especially if you have a different scenario like Charles was talking about with maybe a bonus or something like that, to make sure that we feel like it's documented the right way.
Oh, and this
can
doesn't go to the
also
lender,
ask
does
the
it?
listing
It just goes to the attorney, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
I don't see why it's not officially part of the contract, so the lender would
Exactly.
need to see it.
Just like a bill of sale. Okay, got it.
One thing that we do need to ask on our next call with Ben is if he wants to tell us if he's seeing this being done on CDs and what that looks like. Brandon, another thing that might be a good idea to do is maybe you could ask Ray to do this.
Doug, you went out. Can you repeat that again?
I said maybe have talk to our attorney up here that we use a lot and ask how he's seen it done or how he thinks it should be done, just as far as how it's on the CD and everything, and any additional information we need to provide as part of like getting documents to him and lining up closing, like with that. Like, is the buyer form going to change now? You know, a lot of them have information on there about where the compensation is coming from. I know every attorney uses a different one, so just are filled out correctly, but April can help with that as well. You just need to make sure she's aware as well for those documents, right? To make sure it's properly translated, because, you know, it's going to be incumbent upon us to make sure the attorney knows how we're getting paid. I don't want somebody calling me 2 weeks after closing and say, oh, the attorney didn't put the buyer, you know, paid compensation coming to our firm. I mean, that's your job to make sure it's communicated. So don't let that happen to you and not get paid. Make sense? Okay. These are about termination of a contract. Edits about the seller not agreeing to the buyer reason for terminating. This is an important edit that will help the sellers feel more comfortable releasing the earnest money deposit, even if they disagree. You know, they don't have to agree, really. But it's just clarifying the language. Same thing for the land. Agency agreement termination. Edit made to protect the agent if the expense reimbursement is not in fact received at the time the termination is executed. Meaning if you put a provision in there where they have to compensate you for your time or your marketing dollars that you spent or something like that. They added sewer to the professional services disclosure. Referral agreement. Sorry, I missed one. Technical edits made to clear when a referral fee. I think Janine just asked about this in the group yesterday. When they're supposed to, when it's earned, but also when it's due to you from the other side. And then there's several edits made to the offer to purchase for new construction. So really make sure that you go in and look at these as well. and replaced with construction fees. Mandatory detail plans and specifications are itemized. Mechanism for construction fees to be refunded if there's a material breach of contract by the builder side. Standard and triggered events for when construction fees must be paid. Requirement that any significant deviation from plans and specifications must be agreed to in writing by a change order. Deadlines built into each phase of construction. So a lot more protections in here for our buyers that are using this. Just remember, most builders have their own contracts and don't use this.
Yeah,
I
that
know we
sounds a
see it
lot
more
like
at
the
coast
custom
with some
home
smaller
world.
Yep. So just, be aware of these. It looks like they've added some nice additional protections for the buyers in there, because I know people on this chat specifically have had issues with with builders not doing what they said they were going to do as part of the process. And this isn't the same thing, but just to share a story Ellen told me this week. She's got new construction that's supposed to close. I think it was supposed to close this week. Guess what? The HVAC unit got stolen out of the yard. They ripped it off the house. How
Yes.
about that?
People are desperate.
They really are. It's crazy.
That's sad.
Yeah. So.
Well, I
but
guess
the
that's
thing
why
is,
they've got builder's risk, right?
100%. And to Ellen's point, man, for her clients, thank God it happened before closing.
No kidding.
Yeah, they're terrified to
So-
close, actually. They're afraid it's going to happen again. I told them, wait until your moving truck's ready. We already had to postpone, so 2 more days isn't going to kill us. Let's make sure you get in the house and it's not vacant.
Bless it. So now, do they have to have like a whole nother like HVAC city inspection and all that then, Ellen, with the hookup and everything?
Well, the hookup, and then we had to do the differential testing and everything, yeah.
All
The-
that, yeah, bless it. Nothing ceases to amaze me in this business.
Definitely. It's always a new experience. So I hope this was helpful. I'm sorry about the Wi-Fi and the connection. I apologize about that. I included
Yeah.
the links. Make sure that you check those out. I'll put the links to these in the video when I post it on YouTube, so it'll be in the comments so you can reference it there as well. If you have any questions when dealing with these new forms, let me know. If you scroll to the bottom of the NC Realtors link that I posted, here, I'll share it just again for your reference. You can see down at the bottom, there's more resources around the new forms and stuff. So all of the tools are there at your disposal to make sure that you understand them correctly. Any questions?
No, thank you,
No
Doug.
questions? Okay. You guys are welcome.
No, I'm gonna.
I think
Go
we'll
for
have a
that
lot of
side.
questions as we start doing it and be like, wait, what?
Yeah, I think so too. I'm gonna go
100%.
read the site now.
Just as a reminder, the NAR stuff really kicks in August. Just pretend it's August. Go ahead and do this stuff. Get your agency before showing properties. All this stuff is not as complicated as it seems if you practice your language and know how to explain it to folks. You don't have to make it a big deal. Just translate it in layman's terms so they understand. And it's standard practice now. We all have to do it. Every agent has to do it. If other agents aren't telling you this is required starting in August, then think about that, because it's definitely required by everyone.
So Doug, let
Any
me ask you
questions?
that. I do have one question. So in the
Okay.
event that I'm just giving a scenario, sometimes I only have clients that only want to see one house. What do we do in the event where we absolutely cannot get a hold of an agent before a showing to figure it out? I mean, obviously we've already had the conversation with our clients regarding commission, and if they're not, whatever, they have to be comfortable making up the difference. But we can still show the house even if we don't know whether or not, or haven't been able to get a hold of a listing agent to determine whether they're offering compensation or not, do you advise to just show the house anyway and then deal with it on the backside of it?
I always recommend showing the house, especially if it's the first time to get in front of somebody, if they're willing to sign the agency agreement. It's why it's so incumbent upon us to make sure that we fully explain, hey, I might not know before we see a house. So you have to be prepared to do this.
Okay.
And if you're not, then we are not going to see the house until we know if it's important to you.
Okay. Okay. Gosh, not all agents are created equal out there. And I just hope that the ones that aren't used to picking up phones and texting can do a better job.
I'm confident that at some point, somewhere, there's going to be something for us to know what it is without having to call everyone, but it's just not there yet.
Yeah.
Also, you know, you're allowed to put it on your own personal website. It just can't be an MLS. So we might need to figure out how to do that. But again, it comes down to each individual listing.
You can also put it on your social media.
So
you can't?
it's always something different. But those who yeah, it just can't be an MLS.
No,
So you can
MLS or
direct them to
showing
like
time.
your
Be anywhere
Facebook or
but an MLS
Insta, or
does.
just be like, please check out Facebook or Insta for more, or my website for more info.
So in the most recent seminar I was in, you are not supposed to try to skirt the rules, which I would argue that check my website for more information. I would argue that somebody would have a problem with that. You can put it in your social media. You can put it on your website. The two things that I specifically saw that were asked about was, one, you cannot hint to it on the MLS in any way. You also cannot have it come from an email that is generated from showing time. So like if you have your listing set where you email the disclosures after someone books an appointment, or you request feedback or something like that, you cannot allude to a commission in showing time. Many showing time, not all showing times, but some showing time. Actually, I think Zillow bought showing time, but because of their agreement with the MLS, it's considered an extension of the MLS.
Yeah, we have Broker
So
Bay
more
here, and
information.
you can't chat through Broker Bay about commissions.
But you can email someone after you get confirmation of a showing and let them know what you're offering. And
Oh, that's a good idea.
I'm optimistic that most agents will be doing that because they want to sell their listing.
Oh, that's a good idea. So just anybody that books a showing on your listing, immediately email them and say, hey, saving you some trouble and legwork, we're offering X% on this deal.
100,000 million%.
Oh,
yes.
that's a great idea.
There's also nothing wrong with creating a sheet for your disclosure binder that you put in your listings. You put a binder on the bar in the house. There's nothing preventing you from doing a little one pager there at the front of the binder.
This is what I think we should do. We've got the stand-up sheet things. Just put a sheet on that. I'll fix the template to make it easy.
Good. I was just going to
and
ask you.
I'll put, and you can just put it right on the kitchen island. The Oceanair Realty pays X%, or we're paying X%, or X% offered to buyer agent.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say. Because I remember the guy.
But almost after every showing request I get in Showing Time or Broker Bay, I open the email, I copy the buyer agent's email, I forward that email to the buyer agent. So it's not coming from Showing Time, it's coming from my email address.
Okay.
And I say, hey, Bob, thanks for booking. I'll put in anything else that they need to know. Like one of my listings now is offering seller paid closing costs, just to make sure that they're aware of that. Or, hey, make sure you don't let the cats out or something like that. Also, we're offering X% on this.
Okay, perfect. That's a great idea. Yeah, because I remember the guy in the meeting was saying if your firm has like an attorney that wants to draft certain language to communicate that, if we had some kind of standard form that we could, exactly like you just said, put in our binders or whatever for agents that show.
I would suggest, first off, if you're not already reaching out to people once they're booking appointments on your showings, you should be doing that because don't you want to sell the property and win the agent over so they want to work with you? But also that's the perfect time to let them know what's being offered. All right, great discussion. I hope this was helpful. Maybe the internet got better at the end. I don't know. If you have any questions, of course, reach out to me and I'll be here to help. Coast folks, I'll see you tomorrow.
11 o'clock at the office?
11 o'clock at the office.
Okay, thanks.
Have a great day, everybody.